Hey, welcome back to Lesson 12 of Modern DevTools. In this lesson, I want to show you 4 fairly experimental features of DevTools, and the whole point of these features that we're going to look at is how it can enable your development and authoring workflow. I think for quite a few of these lessons, in fact, almost all of them except this one, I guess, we have been diving in quite heavily into performance, so I thought it'd be nice to have a little break into something a bit different. Alright, let's get straight into it. I've got this app and it should be serving at localhost port 9000. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and here I can type in gulp serve. Now if you want to follow along, it's not that hard. In fact, you just want to go to generate a web app, and you'll need a tool called Yeoman installed, which you might have heard of, and all the instructions are explained very clearly here. So if you just follow these instructions, you'll be able to get this app that you see here. You basically npm install, then run gulp serve, and you're sorted. Now, what are these features that I wanted to show you? Well, feature number 1 is a built-in terminal. Now, if you look at what I had to do to get this web app running, I had to go into my terminal and type in gulp serve, come here and then reload the page. Okay, that's one way of doing it, but there's actually a built-in terminal in DevTools, so I can hit escape, and oh, you can't see it, so let me drag this drawer up a little. There we go. Terminal. And yeah, you've got a built-in terminal in DevTools, which I think is really, really cool. And so just to clarify, the web server is now closed. And if I go to my web app folder, and by the way, if this is the first time you're seeing it, this is indeed a fully functioning terminal with all the regular commands. This is ping Google, all the regular bash commands that you're familiar with. However, this does come with a major catch. It's completely experimental. It does require a few extra steps. If we do a search for terminal, it's this one, I believe. So on tip 139, you've got a bunch of instructions for how you can get the terminal working in your own instance of Chrome Stable or Chrome Canary. However, if you are following along, don't feel like this feature is the one that you must get working. In fact, we're going to take a look at the feature you must get working next. Alright, so for now I'm going to stick with this, the built-in terminal. I'll run gulp serve. That's going to run some setup scripts, and at some point I'll be able to reload and see the web app working. And again, this is all thanks to generate a web app. So if you are following along, that's what you want to install. At this point, I want to show you the one goal we have in this entire screencast. And the one goal is to make a really minor CSS change to this button. So I'll just inspect that over here. And let's say we want to change this rotation value, which I've injected into the CSS. Now you probably know this. What's going to happen if I change that 0 degrees into, let's say, 50 degrees? You see the change immediately. However, if I command click and go to my Sass code, notice this is Sass, not CSS. You see the mapping hasn't really been made. It's showing me 0 degrees, and in this case it's 50 degrees, so it's not really made a mapping of any sort. And of course, if I reload the browser, what's going to happen? I lose my changes. And it's important that we went through that because the feature I'm about to show, which is Workspaces, is a feature which aims to solve a problem. So now that we've seen the problem, let's see what the feature is and how it can help us with that. I'll close this file, and I'm going to make this a little bigger just so you can see the tab I'm going to. It's called the File System tab. Again, this is experimental. All features I'm showing are currently experimental. However, that doesn't mean you can't try it out. In my own personal workflows for some web apps, I do use them quite successfully. I think it works really nicely. Alright, so I'm going to go add folder to workspace, and in this pop-up dialog, I see it's already selected my web app demo because I've done this previously. So I'll hit select, and DevTools now requests full access to write to the file system. Okay, so that's pretty normal. Hit allow, and let's make sure the web server is still up. It is. So if we go back to this button, remember the whole goal of this lesson is to change the rotation of this button. Yeah, I know, really ambitious in this course, aren't we? So if we find that rotation, I'm going to command click. And now what is super interesting here is it's taken me to the Sass code. And this is exactly the same as previously, but if I zoom in, you see it's got this little green indicator, and it's telling me that it's a link to source maps. So if you want to know how this is working, there's your answer. It's all source maps. If you haven't got source maps enabled, and I assume that you're using Sass or less or something that gets compiled into CSS, I highly recommend you get it working. And of course, this also applies to JavaScript. For example, if you're writing in TypeScript or even CoffeeScript. And of course, one of the more popular use cases is if you're transpiling your modern ES6, ES7 code into ES5 code using something like Babel. Or is it Babel? I don't know anymore. All right, so we've got these green dots everywhere. That's a good thing. It's telling us it's linked the code in the network to the code on the file system. Now, what is the result of this? Well, the result is we can start making changes right here. So I'm going to change 0 degrees into, let's say, 100. And feature number 3 has now manifested itself, okay? So to recap, feature number 1 is the terminal, right? Feature number 2 is the file system, okay? How you can just drag and drop your file system folders into DevTools, and DevTools will just immediately have write access to it once you've granted it, and that enables some more interesting workflows. Now, feature number 3 is the sources diff. But if I'm writing a new selector, okay, it's kind of working. It'll give me these indicators in the line getter which hint me, am I adding a line? Or in this case, let's remove that. Yeah, you see we've got this red. So it's giving me clues onto whether I've removed or added lines or modified them. Okay, in this case, I have modified a line, so it highlights this kind of purple color. We can make changes. Now, what happens if I right click and go save? Oh, cool, did you see that? The page, or the button in this case, actually updated in real time, which is really cool. So I'll change that back into 0, hit save. I'm using the Command S now. Let's make that 180. Let's just add some zeros in there. Yeah. Okay, so how is this working? In this particular instance, it's not just DevTools which is being super fancy. It's actually something I've got in the background, which is being run in the terminal, and that's Gulp. Now, how does this work? Well, Gulp, and in your case, you can use Webpack, you can use Grunt, but in this case, it's Gulp, which is what the web app Yeoman generator comes with, is it comes with browser sync. And what browser sync does is something quite interesting. If we go into the source code of the page, you see it's got this document.write. I know best practices, but this is only for development, so whatever. But it's got this document.write, and it's writing this browser sync client.js. Now, it turns out that that piece of JavaScript watches for changes, or should I say it gets alerted about changes from Gulp every time I change some code, or specifically every time new CSS code is compiled. And then rather than reloading the page, which is what a tool like Live Reload might do, it actually injects the CSS dynamically into the page. And that's how, if you were paying attention, that's why the entire page doesn't reload. That button actually animates to its new position, even I'm changing values in a SCSS file. Right, so I'm changing Sass code, and we can still see the changes in real time. And to me, that is a pretty powerful workflow. However, that was not feature number 4. Remember I said we're going to take a look at 4 features? Feature number 4 is, again, it's a bit more of a nice to have, kind of like how the terminal was a nice to have. Really, the takeaway here should be this Workspaces feature. But the nice to have feature is the changes panel. Now, when I do make changes, let's change that to 100. Shall I add? Yeah, I'll just add some ink. Border 1 pixel, solid red. Okay, so I've modified something, I have added some new lines, and the line getter correctly identifies that some changes have been made. But depending on your use case, you may want to know exactly what those changes were. So, escape, 3 dots, and let me just make that a little bigger, 3 dots, and there's a panel somewhere called changes. And the changes panel does, well, exactly what it sounds like. It tells you what changes you've made, giving you this kind of Git style overview of exactly what you've done. And what's kind of nice is I've added a bunch of nonsense code, so I'm going to revert all changes. And there we go, back to normal. And while we're here, just finally a little side tip. This selector .btn, I might forget about that. So if I scroll to the bottom, rather than having to scroll up and like scan every line of code to make sure I'm looking at the selector I care about, I can hit Command, Shift, and O. And I can now start typing in parts of the selector, and you see it matches. So here's the selector I'm interested in, and it takes me directly there. So again, that shortcut was Command, Shift, and O. Very quickly, Command, Shift, and P, type in experiments, show experiments, And I just wanted to quickly show you, here are the experiments I had to enable for this video. In my particular case, I tend to keep these on, and you can probably do exactly the same and you'll experience no problems. I guess some other people, maybe on different platforms, may have a different experience, but for me, these have been working quite nicely. Okay, so we've got the changes drawer, and that's where you get a Git style overview of what changes you've been making. You got persistence 2.0, and that's the really powerful one, the one that I want you to take away from this video. And that's where you can make changes from the sources panel and save that to disk. Okay. We've also got sources diff, and that's just basically colors in the line gutter to hint to you that a change has been made. And finally, we got the terminal in drawer. Highly experimental. If you do want to follow along, go to my to this DevTools project, search for terminal, and it's the one that mentions about linters, and all the instructions are displayed on this page. You do have to do a bit of setup to get it working, but once you do, it tends to work reasonably well, but it has still got a few quirks. Anyway, that's it. Do give this a try. Don't feel like you have to get all of that working. If there's one thing to get working, it would definitely be the Workspaces feature. So try dragging and dropping your file system folder into DevTools and getting into the habit of making changes in here. Now, all that being said, you may discover, because of your particular project setup, that it's not really suitable to make changes in here, and it's actually easier to make changes in your code editor, and that's completely fine. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. In some of the future lessons, I'm thinking to cover a bit of memory management in regards to JavaScript, and specifically how you can observe memory in the DevTools. So if that sounds interesting to you, let me know in a comment, let me know on Twitter, and I'll get that done.